Okay, today we are going to be looking at completing the square. Completing the square is the process of creating what we call a perfect square trinomial. So don't worry about number 1. But a perfect square trinomial is something in the form of, for example, x plus 2 quantity squared. We want to be able to write something so that it is a binomial times itself. Remember, that's what x plus 2 squared means. It's x plus 2 times x plus 2. So how do we do that? Well, it's kind of a process or a formula you want to memorize. The b in this particular problem is 8. And we're going to take 8, divide it by 2, and square the result. Okay. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. We square that result, so it's going to be 16. We add that to this blank. Okay, so what I've done is just created from the x squared plus 8x, I've added 16 so that now this expression, this quadratic equation, is a perfect square trinomial. It should factor nicely. Notice if we do our diamond problem, two numbers that multiply to be 16 add up to 8. The two numbers are 4 and 4. So we know that factors to x plus 4 times x plus 4. We want to write that as x plus 4 squared. So that's the factored form. 16 is what we added to complete the square. So let's try another one. X squared plus 12x. What would I add here? Take your b term, divide it by 2, square the result. 12 divided by 2 is 6. Square that, should equal 36. So we're going to put that in the blank. Again, if you did it right, it should factor. Two numbers that multiply to be 36 add up to 12. The two numbers are 6 and 6. So the two factors are x plus 6, x plus 6. We can write that as x plus 6 quantity squared. Okay. This one happens to be a negative, so we're going to take negative 14 divided by 2, half of b, square it. So that's going to be negative 7 squared. Negative 7 times negative 7 is a positive 49. So again, check to see if this factors. Multiplies to be 49, adds up to negative 14. The two numbers are negative 7, negative 7. So it should factor to be x minus 7, or x minus 7 squared. Now notice you may see a pattern. This number 4 is coming from half of b before we squared it. This 6 is coming from half of b before we squared it. And again over here, 7 is half of b. So it's kind of nice to see if you did it correctly, that's what it should factor to. Now why is this important? Well, we can use this process to actually solve a quadratic equation by this process of completing the square. So these are going to have a few more steps. Looks complicated at first, but it's not too bad. The first step, we always want to move our c, our constant, to the other side. So on a, this is already done for us. So I should have my x squared and my x term on the left-hand side. Then we're going to add something to make this a perfect square trinomial. So what we just practiced, we take half of 8, square it. So that's 4 squared, or 16. Okay. Put the 16 in the blank, we add 16. Now remember, in an equation, I can't add something to one side without balancing it out on the other side. So we put a plus 16 on each side. Okay. I'm going to erase this so I have more room. Okay. So once I've determined what to add to both sides, we want to factor this left side of the equation. Well, we just factored this in part A, but again, if you want to do it again, 16, 8, 4 and 4, So this should factor to be x plus 4 quantity squared. Simplify the right-hand side, which is 25. And then, oh my gosh, we should have an equation that looks like what we solved yesterday. The whole point of completing the square is so I can have something squared, and I can solve by taking the square root of both sides. So it's the same process as yesterday, square root both sides. It's going to undo the squared, so we get x plus 4 equals, what do I have to remember here? Very important, plus minus 5. Okay. Last, solve for x, minus 4. So you get x equals negative 4 plus or minus 5. And I can simplify the solution to negative 4 plus 5, which is 1. Negative 4 minus 5, which is negative 9. And you're done. Okay, so let's try a few more. Part C. Again, the first step was to move the constant to the other side. So I'm going to add 10. You get x squared plus 4x. I'm going to leave a blank spot. And we complete the square with 4. So I'm going to take 4, half of 4, and square it. So that's 2 squared, or 4. I'm going to add 4 to both sides. And if I did it right, this side should factor nicely. Multiplies to be 4, adds up to 4, 2 and 2. So it should factor to be x plus 2 quantity squared equals 14. Now we take the square root of both sides, and x plus 2 squared, the squared will cancel out. We get x plus 2 equals plus minus square root 14. Last, solve for x by subtracting 2 from both sides, and we get x equals negative 2 plus minus square root 14. Remember, in this instant, we cannot add those terms together. They're not like terms. Okay, and let's try one more. I'll try a hard one with you. Letter G, down at the bottom. So the constant's already on the right-hand side. Let's move the 12x over to the same side as the x squared. So I'm going to subtract the 12x over. X squared minus 12x, leave a space, equals 14. And then complete the square. Determine what you're going to add to both sides. We take negative 12 divided by 2, square it. So it's negative 6 squared, which is 36. I'm going to add 36 to both sides. Factor this perfect square trinomial. So two numbers that multiply to be 36 add up to negative 12. Those should be negative 6 and negative 6. So x minus 6 quantity squared equals, add 14 and 36. That should be 50. And now solve by taking the square root. Square root both sides. X minus 6 equals plus minus square root of 50 simplifies as 5 root 2. Okay. And now we add 6 to both sides. So again, express your answer as 6 plus or minus 5 root 2. And you're all done. Okay, so I've done 3 of those with you. You have about 5 more to practice, and the back side that has some graphing. And hopefully that helps you to start this intro of completing the square, and we'll do more tomorrow in class. Good luck.